Greetings, dear students, to today's science class, which deals with the second part of animal tissues, chapter 6. Now, I am Deepika Singh Rajawat, PGT Biology from KVCMM, Jabalpur. Now, we have already seen that animal tissues can be divided into four types depending upon the functions they perform, that is, epithelial tissue, the connective tissue, the muscular tissue, and the nervous tissue. In our previous class, we have already discussed muscular tissue and nervous tissue, and we have also seen the slides in the practical. Now, let us take today the remaining two tissues. First of all, the epithelial tissue. Again, remember, children, that the characteristics of the tissue will always be related with the function they are going to perform later on. So, epithelial tissue here, you can see that they form covering or protective tissues in the animal body. So, all your coverings like skin, etc., all this will be epithelial tissue. Even the coverings of organs, the cavities in the body. So, what is it actually doing? It is separating different tissues and different organs from each other. Some examples include the skin, the lining of the mouth, the lining of blood vessels, the lung alveoli, and the kidney tubules. Lung alveoli or single is alveolus. This is the last part in the lung. When you are breathing in, the air is going through tubes, and ultimately these tubes are branching inside your lungs, becoming smaller and smaller, and they are ultimately opening into a thin balloon like structure, which is having many of these, again, small pockets called alveoli. Now, alveoli will be surrounded by blood capillaries because the oxygen that you are going to exchange from the air that you have taken in, that oxygen will be sent to the blood. So, the oxygen will be going across into the blood from the alveoli. Now, because it is forming the covering or it is forming the lining, it should have certain characteristics. Cells are tightly packed to form a continuous sheet. अगर हमको प्रोटेक्ट करना है तो सेल्स के बीच में जगह नहीं होनी चाहिए. So here in the picture you can see the cells are tightly packed with very small amount of cementing material between them. को जोड़ के रखने के लिए कोई बहुत ज़्यादा मटेरियल नहीं यूज़ होता है. You can see there are no intercellular spaces, but what is important is it is across this membrane so many materials will be exchanged. So it should be permeable. The cell should allow materials to move. And this is very important that always at the base there is an extracellular fibrous basement membrane. ये epithelial tissue की बहुत खास चीज़ है. You can see this line at the base. ये basement membrane है. ये सेल नहीं है, ये कोई और मटेरियल होता है, एक फाइब्रस मटेरियल होता है जिस पर ये सेल्स अरेंज्ड होते हैं. ओके, सो दिस इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. अगर एपिथेलियल टिश्यू है तो बेसमेंट मेम्ब्रेन होगा. इफ देर इज़ वन लेयर ऑफ सेल्स, they will be arranged on the basement membrane. If there are many layers of cell, then the lowermost layer will be arranged on the basement membrane. Then let us do the classification of epithelial tissue. Depending upon the number of cell layers, they are broadly of two types: the simple epithelial tissue, and as the name is suggesting, it is made up of only one layer of cells. Then you have the stratified epithelial tissue, which means there are many strata or many layers of cells. Stratified comes from strata. Strata means layers. So depending on the shape of cell, layers तो हो गई, अब shape. किस किस तरह के shape हो सकते हैं cells के? There can be squamous, there could be cuboidal, or there could be columnar. In addition to that, you have some special types of epithelial tissue which are glandular and which are some are also ciliated. So now let us look at some of them. Now it is very important to remember that whatever is the structure of the epithelial cell or the epithelial tissue, it will be related with the function that it performs. For example, if it is forming the outer covering, अगर कवरिंग बनाना है, कवरिंग प्रोटेक्शन के लिए होती है, तो many layered होगी. If you imagine your skin to be single layer, how thin the cells are. Okay, so your skin is multi-layered. ताकि अगर कहीं आपका हाथ टकरा जाता है या रगड़ खाता है, तो अगर कुछ सेल्स ऊपर से झड़ भी जाते हैं तो एकदम से खून नहीं निकलेगा. ओके, epithelial cells you have just now seen, they don't have blood supply. तो ब्लड कैपिलरीज जो हैं वो बेसमेंट मेम्ब्रेन के नीचे होती हैं, और जो भी मटेरियल चाहिए सेल को वो वहाँ से डिफ्यूज़ होकर सेल के पास आता है. नाउ व्हेन दे आर इनर लाइनिंग ऑफ द सेल्स, अगर अंदर से हैं तो उनके कुछ खास फंक्शन हो सकते हैं. नंबर 1, लाइनिंग में है तो वो अब्जॉर्ब भी कर सकते हैं सर्टन मटेरियल्स. ओके, so in that case they can be thin, flat, single layer of cells. Example, blood capillaries and lung alveoli. अगर कुछ मैटर एक्सचेंज करना है तो वो थिन फ्लैट सेल्स होंगे. दे मे हैव माइक्रोविलाई, छोटी छोटी विलाय हो सकती हैं. दोज विल इंक्रीज द सरफेस एरिया फॉर एब्जॉर्प्शन. सो यू सी सच काइंड ऑफ सेल्स इन द लोअर पार्ट ऑफ द इंटेस्टाइन. इंटेस्टाइन आपकी बहुत बड़ी होती है, 7 मीटर की होती है लगभग. सो एट द अदर एंड ऑफ द लोअर एंड ऑफ द इंटेस्टाइन, जहाँ पर खाना पचने के बाद एब्जॉर्ब होता है, दैट प्लेस यू विल फाइंड सेल्स हैविंग माइक्रोविलाई. Then certain places it can also secrete materials, so it becomes glandular. कुछ एंजाइम सिक्रीट कर सकते हैं, कुछ म्यूकस सिक्रीट कर सकते हैं. Generally you will find it in the stomach and you will find it in the upper end of the intestine. Sometimes when it is in the lining, कुछ movement भी हो सकता है materials का. So in that case the cell may have these structures called cilia. Small hair-like structures are there and they help in the movement of materials. For example, in the ureter, urine को movement कराता है. And lastly, prevent wear and tear of the lining. So again they need to be many layered. कोई अगर अंदर लाइनिंग में भी अगर कोई रगड़ हो रही है तो इसलिए रगड़ से बचने के लिए, लॉस के लिए, they need to be many layered. For example, your cheek cells, the cells of the esophagus, जहाँ पे अभी आपका खाना सॉलिड है, मुंह में भी सॉलिड है और जब हम उसको गुटकते हैं तब भी सॉलिड है, तो वो रगड़ के नुकसान कर सकता है. इसीलिए यहाँ पर भी many layers हैं. Okay. Now let us take the first type, that is simple squamous epithelium. Cells are extremely thin and flat. So one single layer of cell क्योंकि simple है और thin है और flat है. Just see this picture where they are very flat. You can see the bulge only where the nucleus would be. सिर्फ जहाँ न्यूक्लियस है वहाँ से उठा हुआ दिखता है, अदरवाइज सेल्स आर फ्लैट. दिस लोअर पिक्चर इज दैट ऑफ द सरफेस व्यू. जब हम इसको ऊपर से देखते हैं तो यू व्हाट आर यू सीइंग? यू आर सीइंग दैट द सेल्स आर वेरी क्लोजली पैक्ड. क्योंकि अगर ये कवरिंग बना रहे हैं या लाइनिंग बना रहे हैं तो एक कंटिन्यूअस शीट ऑफ सेल्स होना चाहिए, बीच में कुछ भी स्पेस नहीं होना चाहिए. Now this is an actual slide from the microscope where you can see how thin the cells are. One is lining the blood capillary and next to it is the cell of the alveoli. So blood में से कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड निकल के लंग में जाएगी और लंग में से क्या निकल के आएगा? ऑक्सीजन निकल के ब्लड में आएगा. तो बहुत थिन, ये तो माइक्रोस्कोप की है इसलिए इतना मोटा दिख रहा है. अदरवाइज दीज आर वेरी थिन एंड गैसेस कैन easily diffuse from there. So where are they found? They form the delicate lining of blood vessels or lung alveoli and function is exchange of materials. जहाँ भी materials को across जाना होगा, there it will be squamous epithelium. Even in kidney, जब blood से filter होगा material, all the waste material, urea, etc., there will be squamous epithelium. Then the stratified squamous epithelium. Strata means layers. Generally stratified मैंने आपसे बताया कहाँ होगा? जहाँ पर wear and tear होगी, जहाँ रगड़ होगी. तो रगड़ से छिलने का डर होता है, and to prevent any type of injury, there will always be stratified epithelium. Now, one case is stratified squamous epithelium. Here you can see in the diagram, lowermost is the basement membrane on which these cells are there. So basement membrane is clear in the microscope slide also, and then you can see many layers. Now it is named squamous because the topmost layer you can see are flat cells. If the topmost cells were cuboidal or any other shape, then accordingly the name of the epithelium would change to stratified cuboidal epithelium or stratified columnar epithelium. So this is example of stratified squamous, which is seen in the esophagus and lining of the mouth. Now if you remember in your animal cell slide, when you prepare, you're scraping your cheek cells, you're scraping your cheek lining, and then you're observing under the microscope. So you are actually observing the squamous epithelial cells. Now here is one more example of stratified squamous epithelium. I would like you to see that the top layer, the cells are dead. The lowermost layer you can see the cells with nuclei and the cytoplasm, but as these cells are dividing and as these are pushing up, slowly the cytoplasm is being lost and instead some other material is being filled in that, and that is waterproof material, keratin. क्यों होना चाहिए वाटरप्रूफ? अगर हमारे टॉप मोस्ट लेयर जो है स्किन की, अगर वो लिविंग होगी तो डैमेज तो होगा ही होगा, दूसरा वहाँ पर बैक्टीरिया और फंगस भी आराम से रहेंगे, एंड वी डोंट वांट दैट. isn't it? So topmost layer, you can see they are dead cells with a material called keratin. Then you have simple cuboidal epithelium. As the name is suggesting, they are cube-shaped cells. Nucleus is in the center. Very important. You can see cuboidal cells. On the right hand side is a transverse section, and on the left hand side is a longitudinal section of any duct or any tubule. It could be tubule of the kidney, it could be tubule of the salivary gland. So this is how simple cuboidal. न्यूक्लियस देखिए एकदम बीचों बीच बहुत प्रोमिनेंट न्यूक्लियस नज़र आता है. देन यू हैव द सिंपल कॉलमनर एपिथेलियम. कॉलमनर का मतलब है कॉलम लाइक या पिलर लाइक सेल्स होते हैं, लंबे लंबे सेल्स हैं, tall cells with the nucleus at the base here. Nucleus, see you, it's very important, nuclei are at the base. They are forming inner lining of the intestine जहाँ पर absorption और secretion होता है. Then you have one modified of columnar, and that is simple ciliated columnar epithelium, and it is characteristic of the respiratory tract. All the tubes which are there in the respiratory system, they are lining with cilia, hair like structures you can see, and when the cilia they move, they are pushing the mucus forward. Mucus is one sticky substance which is there. So that sticky substance, it captures the dust particles, it captures the microorganisms. So all that movement is brought about with the help of cilia. Then you have the modified glandular epithelium. It can be of two types. The unicellular glands, where one single cell has been modified for secretion. So you can see in the picture, there is one cell and it is in the shape of a goblet. What is a goblet? It's a wine glass. So wine glass, generally it is broad at the top and very thin at the base. So something like that, this cell also appears, and you can see it is producing some secretions. So examples would be again mucus cell. Mucus एक sticky substance होता है जो हमारे पूरे respiratory system या हमारे digestive system की lining पे covering होती है. So that is for protecting the covering, protecting the lining. Then you have the second type of glandular epithelium, that is multicellular glands, where what is happening? The epithelial tissue has got modified into a multicellular gland. Here you can see it has just gone inside and all the cells have started secreting. This is a picture of the glands, multicellular glands. They can be in your salivary glands, they can be in your intestine, they can be in your, say for example, sweat glands or oil glands in your skin. All these are multicellular glands. So here is a picture which shows you the location of all the different epithelial tissue. So pseudostratified ciliated columnar in the respiratory tract, stratified squamous in the esophagus, simple columnar in the intestine, simple cuboidal in the kidney, and the simple squamous in the alveoli of the lungs. Now, these are only some of the epithelial tissue. There are many, many more modified epithelial tissue also. For example, in your eye, there is that black color. That is a modified one. Then in the ovaries and the testes, which give rise to egg and sperm, they are also modified epithelial cells. Then you have, for example, in your taste buds or in your nose, you have some sensory epithelium which are sensing the taste and the smell respectively. So a lot of other examples of epithelial tissue are also there. Here is like a small picture I liked which shows you all the different types for just for an easy remembering. Pseudo-stratified means it is looking as if there are many layers, isn't it? In the extreme right, you see there is a category called pseudo-stratified. But at the base, you see there are only one cell. But because certain cells are broader at the top, it appears that there are 2 or 3 layers. So it's a false layering. That's why pseudo-stratified. Then we go on to the next tissue, which is connective tissue. Now this is most abundant, most widespread and different. It's a varied type of tissue. इसमें बहुत सारे अलग अलग टाइप के टिश्यूज मिलकर कनेक्टिव टिश्यू बनाते हैं. अलग अलग फंक्शंस हैं, लेकिन इसका जो मेन फंक्शन है वो है इट कनेक्ट्स द टिश्यूज एंड ऑर्गन्स. टिश्यूज और ऑर्गन्स को ये बांध के रखता है, इसीलिए वहाँ से इसका नाम है कनेक्टिव टिश्यू. The other functions are to provide support, to physically connect or anchor one another, or sometimes even serve as a framework. जैसे बोन है, बोन भी कनेक्टिव टिश्यू है, वहाँ पर तो वो हमारे बॉडी को एक फ्रेमवर्क दे रही है. Then you have characteristics of connective tissue. Very important, जब हम किसी भी टिश्यू की बात करते हैं तो हम उसके सेल्स की बात करते हैं. So in connective tissue, the cells are loosely spaced. Means दूर दूर हैं ये cells. And there is some space between them. And that space is not an empty space. Something is filled in that space. And that is called matrix. Intercellular matrix. Okay, we'll come to that also. But what is important is that they are loosely spaced. Second thing is connective tissue cells are of many different types. You don't have a single type of cell or 2 types of cells. You have many different types of cells. Some examples which you are familiar with: RBC, WBC, which are there in the blood; bone cells, which are there in the bone. Then we come to matrix. That is the material which is filled between the cells. And it can be of different types. It can be jelly-like, it can be fluid, or it can be very dense or very rigid. So you have different types of matrix in the connective tissue. And third thing very important is that the connective tissue will have fibers in the matrix. Sometimes fibers are absent also, like in blood you don't have any fibers, but most of the other connective tissue, they have fibers. Now what are the types of fibers? Usually there are 2 types, the white fibers and the yellow fibers. We'll see more detail when we see the tissue. How do these white fibers and yellow fibers look like? So very important for connective tissue, the cells are there which are loosely spaced and they are of different types. Then the intercellular matrix, which could be fluid, which could be solid, or which could be jelly-like. And then there are thirdly the fibers, which could be either yellow or white fibers. Here is one picture which shows you different types of cells. These are the bone cells or the osteocytes on the top right hand corner. Then there are these different cells of the cartilage on the left hand side lower corner. You can see simple cells are there in groups of 1, 2, 3. And here there are what are called the fibroblasts. These are cells which are giving rise to fibers. So here this picture you could be very confused with skeletal muscle fiber, but it's actually not skeletal muscle fiber. These are fibroblasts, and then there are parallel rows of the fibers. Now the different types of connective tissue depending upon the type of matrix. So if the matrix is fluid, then example is blood. Matrix may be hard, so example is bone and cartilage. Third is matrix may be jelly-like. In this you have 4 examples in your book: areolar tissue, adipose tissue, tendon and ligament. Apart from this, there are others also, but these are all the connective tissue that are there in your syllabus. Let us take, for example, blood first. Now, whenever we are describing any connective tissue, you must remember what are the type of cells, what is the type of matrix, and whether fibers are present or not. So, in the blood, what all is present? You can see so many cells are present and they are floating in a fluid matrix which is also called plasma. So what are the different types of cells? There are the red blood cells which are spherical. They are red in color because of the pigment hemoglobin. And what is their function? To transport oxygen. Then there are white blood cells which are less in number and they have different functions in the defense of the body. And lastly, there are the platelets which are helping in clotting of blood. So if there is injury, the blood is clotting over there so that there is no loss of blood. Then whatever is in the matrix or the plasma, it is pale yellow in color and it contains lots of proteins and salts and hormones and nutrients like glucose, waste material like urea. So all that is present in the plasma. So function of blood would be to transport all these materials to various parts of the body. It could be nutrients like glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, or it could be salts, or it could be waste materials like urea, uric acid, etc. Or they could be hormones, enzymes, other materials also which can be transported. Second very important function of blood is that it maintains a uniform body temperature. Since it is flowing in all parts of your body very quickly, it will also be helping in maintaining the temperature. So this was about blood, and here is a slide of blood which you call blood smear, because simply the blood is spread on the slide, no other technique is there, and this is what you see under the microscope. Now white blood cells you don't see, you are seeing them here because a special stain has been used, a purple color stain which is Leishman stain, that has been used to prepare this slide. Otherwise white blood cells do not have any color. So you can see the red blood cells, spherical structures, so many in number. Why are they hollow in the center? Because they do not have nuclei. They don't have other cell organelles, so that they can carry maximum hemoglobin and maximum oxygen. As a result of which, what is it? They don't have a big lifespan because they don't have nucleus. So they have a lifespan of 120 days, after which the RBCs will die. Then you have the WBCs. You can see they have nuclei, different shapes of nuclei. So accordingly, we have different types of WBCs. And then these small fragments of cells, they are the platelets. So very tiny fragments you can see. They are part of bigger cells and they are called platelets. Then we come to bone, which is a very strong, non-flexible tissue. Let me ask you, is the bone living or non-living? Well, obviously it is living because it is continuing to grow as you are growing in height. And if there is an injury, if there is a fracture, then there is pain also. There is blood loss also. So all these are characteristic of living. Now bone cells, they are called osteocytes, and they are embedded in a hard matrix composed of calcium and phosphorus compounds. This is how a bone cell looks. See how many processes it has got. So in the diagram, and you compare it with the actual slide, you see it is almost looking like some insect, isn't it? So many processes it has got. Now these are arranged in a particular fashion in the bone. In the human bones, these long bones, they are arranged in circles. ऐसा लग रहा है जैसे चींटियाँ चल रही हैं सर्कल में, है ना? But they are actually these cells with their processes, and they are in touch with each other through the processes, because outside the cell everything is hard, and that is the hard matrix. So they keep in touch with each other through these long processes. And if you see, they are arranged around a central canal, this blue color. That is called the Haversian canal. अब चूंकि आपको ये गोल दिख रही है, तो हड्डी में तो ये लंबी होगी कैनाल. दिस इज अ क्रॉस सेक्शन ऑफ द बोन दैट यू आर सीइंग. So these are like long tubes inside your bone, and these are containing the blood vessels and the nerves, which are going to supply to all these cells, different cells. Now this is the actual slide of the bone, where you can see very clearly the Haversian canals. The circle in the center, those are the Haversian canals around which the bone cells or the osteocytes, they are arranged in circles. This is a typical pattern you find in human bones. And what will be the function of the bone is, it forms a framework, it supports the body, and very important, it will be attaching to the muscles and helping in the movement of the body. Then you come to cartilage. Again, cells are widely spaced. They are called chondrocytes. You can see in the diagram. And in between, there is the matrix, which is mainly made up of some proteins and some sugars. Here you can see the actual slide of one of the types of cartilage where matrix is not having any fibers. So you have again different types of cartilages also. But what is important here is that these cartilage cells, you can see some of them are single, some are in the groups of twos, some in the group of threes, and they are inside some cavity. And outside the cavity there is this transparent, okay, you can see these are the cells, and then the transparent matrix. Hyaline cartilage it is called. And what is its function? It will smoothen bone surface at the joints. Otherwise, the two bones will strike against each other and produce a sound. Khad, 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 two bones, banging against each other. So each bone has got a covering of the cartilage. Then it is also present in the nose, the tip of the nose. You can see it is bending. The ear, that is the pinna of the ear, outer ear. And then there is some in the trachea supporting. The trachea is a tube and it is got the support of cartilage rings, and also your voice box. Voice box is also made up of cartilage. Then the next is the areolar tissue. Now, areolar tissue is a typical connective tissue. Means you can see all the different components of connective tissue in this areolar tissue, and it is a most widespread tissue. Many types of cells you can see. Jelly like matrix is there, and the two types of fibers are there. So here you can see different types of cells you can see. There are what are called fibroblasts. Those are the cells which give rise to fibers. Then you can see there are the what are called plasma cells, the mast cells. Mast cells actually they are helping in defense. Now if there is an injury and if the mast cell is destroyed, then it produces a chemical which sends the signal to WBCs that okay, there is an injury over here, please come and clear up all the bacteria, etc. Then you also have macrophages which are also doing the same thing. Macro matlab bada, phage matlab khana. So these cells can also eat up big size bacteria, etc. So you can see two types of fibers also there. One, you can see they are parallel, unbranched, and they are in bundles. Those are the white fibers. And the other ones, they are the branched ones. You can see they are the yellow fibers. Then they are located between the skin and the muscles, around the blood vessels, in the bone marrow, inside the organs, just like below the skin, and they support internal organs and help in repair of tissues. So generally areolar skin is below your areolar tissue is below your skin. Then you have adipose tissue. So the cells are called adipocytes, and it is a tissue which is storing fat in the cells. So you can see in this picture everything has been pushed on one side in the cell, the nucleus, etc., and all the space inside is for storing fat. Here are the cells which are storing the fat. Now, where would you find this type of tissue? Again, below the skin, because there it is going to help in insulation. So, whatever weather is outside, your body will try and maintain a constant body temperature. There will be neither a heat loss nor a heat gain. Then it also provides a cushion for internal organs, like your eyes, for example. They are located in the skull, which is made up of bones. So, just behind your eye, there is a cushion of this adipose tissue, which will be protecting the eye. Also, you can have it, say, around kidneys for protection, etc. Then there is this tissue called tendon. So it's a very strong tissue. You can see a white strip of a tissue which is connecting the muscle to the bone. The white strip that you see, that is tendon. Why it has to be strong? Because as the muscle will contract, it will pull the bone also along with it and help in movement. So it has to be a very tough tissue, very strong tissue, and it is made up of a fibrous tissue. A lot of fibers are present in tendon. It's not very flexible. The second type is ligament. It's a tissue which is connecting two bones, one bone to other bone. There is always some space between the two bones. So they need to be connected, otherwise one bone will move in one direction, the other bone will move in another direction. So in order to keep them together, there are these ligaments which are providing some elasticity, but at the same time they are providing some strength also. Now if you remember, you may have come across, not remember, sorry, you may have come across that sometimes when you are running, you twist your leg and you say it is a sprain. Okay, sometimes it could be more severe, and then the doctor says you have broken a ligament or you have ruptured a ligament. So that is what he means. The ligament is a tissue which is connecting two bones. So when the leg got twisted, the ligament could have been damaged. And as the bone also need repairs, similarly even ligament needs time for repair. Now here, to wind up, is a picture which shows you different types of connective tissues. Okay, the cartilage, the bone, the blood, the adipose tissue, the loose connective tissue, that is areolar tissue, and the fibrous connective tissue, that's like ligament, all these. But I prefer this picture where a part of the hand they are trying to show you all the connective type of tissues. Inside the hand there is blood vessels, so blood is flowing. There is a bone, so bone tissue is there. And at the end of the bone there is cartilage. Then some people have deposits of adipose tissue, the fat storing tissue in the arm. And then you have the loose connective tissue and the dense connective tissue. Now, this is an interesting difference. In your textbook, if you see, this is right in the beginning, the difference between plant tissues and animal tissues. But I thought after completing the chapter, then we should do the difference so that it is more clear to you. Now, plants are stationary. They don't show movement. So most of the tissues for plant will be for only for support. And they need not be living cells, they could be dead cells also. So many places we have seen they are dead cells, like sclerenchyma, like xylem sclerenchyma, like trachees, vessels, sieve tube cells, they are all dead cells. Whereas in animal tissues, because animals are continuously moving, you have different types of tissues for different functions. And most of these are living. Very few there are examples where the cells are dead. Then when you talk about plant tissues, the growth is not uniform. What does this mean? That in the plant there are some regions which continue to grow. ऐसा नहीं है कि पूरा प्लांट एक साथ ग्रो करता है. आपने मेरिस्टेमेटिक टिश्यू पढ़ा है. स्टेम टिप ग्रोज, रूट टिप ग्रोज. Intercalary meristem grows, lateral cambium grows. So there are regions which are growing, but there are certain areas which are not growing. Whereas in animals, if you see, if there is growth throughout the body. So it's a uniform type of growth. Then in plant tissues, there are less complications. Plant structure is less complicated as you compare it with the animal organization. So quickly, before we finish, let us identify some epithelial tissues and state their function. So first is this cuboidal. simple epithelium, and it is located in the ducts of salivary glands, of tubules, where they are absorbing some amount of food, etc., or they are secreting. Then these are multicellular glands and they are secreting enzymes. Then this is stratified squamous epithelium, but since they are not dead cells, so you will find them in the esophagus and the lining of the mouth, and their location is esophagus and mouth, and function is to prevent wear and tear. Then these are simple squamous epithelium lining the lung alveoli and the blood capillary. Finally, this is the unicellular gland and it is showing some secretions. And on the last slide or the last picture, it is simple columnar and it has got also cilia, so it may be present in the trachea. Then identify the following connective tissues. Let us see. This is transverse section of human bone. Characteristic would be that they have Haversian canal and all the cells are arranged around the Haversian canal. Then areolar tissue, which is having all different types of cells, different types of muscle fibers are seen in this tissue of areolar cell. Then you have the ligaments which are connecting bone to bone. You have the tendon which is connecting bone to muscle. Then there is a slide of the adipose tissue which is storing fat. Then slide of blood smear, and finally the cartilage. The cartilage slide which shows cells in groups of 1, 2, 3 and they are present in a cavity, and intercellular spaces they are filled with matrix, transparent matrix. So with this we come to the end of the chapter animal tissues. Again certain references for you. I hope now after completion of the chapter you will please now try to finish the notes. For any clarity you can ask your teacher, or you can refer to either this video or to any of the other videos which I have used in the reference. So thank you, and be safe, be healthy, and enjoy learning.